Hi everyone, you're watching the Tech Talk series by the Gold Code. We've got a really special episode today with not just one, but two of our favorite front-end developers, Kassandra Sanchez and Annie Liu.
Our first guest is Annie, who's a very driven front-end web developer with some serious design jobs. She works with both the technical and aesthetic side of product, and it's so lovely to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. And our second guest is Kassandra Sanchez, who's a web designer, and her 100 Days of Code series on Twitter is filled with some absolutely fantastic CSS animations. I'm a huge fan. We're delighted to have you here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much again for being here with us. Annie, before we get into the nuances of the programming side of your life, we actually found it pretty interesting that you're a licensed scuba diver. How does that tie in with your life?
I think for me, I'm not a great swimmer, so I wanted to get my diving license because it was me facing a fear and just kind of overcoming that fear. Because so once I actually I got my scuba diving license in the Philippines, and I actually went there just to get my basic one. But when I was there, I ended up getting my advanced scuba diving license, which means you can dive down to 30 meters. So I kind of like challenging myself, and it was a really great way to do that, to be like, okay, I'm really scared of, I'm not a strong swimmer, I'm really scared of the water, I'm not the best, but I'm gonna do this. And it turned out really, really well. So it was just one of the things I did to challenge myself in my personal life.
That's great. We love a determined personality. Kass, you've been really invested in your 100 Days of Code challenge these past few months. How does your Twitter community and this challenge help you to stay motivated to code during this whole quarantine period?
Well, I mean, I started it because I was so bored during quarantine that I was like, okay, what can I do? And I'd never really used Twitter before until May. I had an account since 2013 or something, and I 5 followers in May, and I was just, I'll just start posting little things that I want to do or learn, because my manager had asked me to make her an animation, and I couldn't figure it out. It was 3 hours, and I still was no clue. So I decided right then and there that okay, I'm going to do this 100 Days of Code, and I'm going to figure out animations and all that stuff. And so I've been posting it on Twitter, and little by little I would get 15 likes, 50 likes, and now it's just, it really the validation was really nice that I wasn't just it was good to know that I was on the right path there. But it's been so much fun. I learned a lot so far.
That's really, really great. And I think just having that Twitter community and the tech community with you is just really helpful to be productive when we're all in lockdown. So that's really great. So I think before we get into deep dive about front end and web development, which have both become so important nowadays, we just wanted to start with talking about why they're so important. So of course, front end is a very, very client facing, and it sort of deals with everything that the user actually sees and interacts with, which is why it's such an important part of programming nowadays. But maybe we can just start with breaking down this buzzword front end, what it actually means for our viewers out there.
Okay. Front end deals with the client side of things. So it's basically what people see on the browser, the visual side of things, and how they interact with the elements on the screen. So in, I guess, web design, there's front end and back end. And when I was first, looking into it, it was very confusing about what these two different parts were. Yeah. But back end, I guess, Kass deals more with databases and setting up the environments. Whereas front end deals more with the user experiences and how the users actually interact with the website. But maybe Kass can expand on that a little bit.
There's also the accessibility part of it too. You have to make sure that everyone everywhere can access the website the same way, no matter what. And it's nice to try to make old websites and try to redo them to where you know, they're accessible to a lot more people. So that also has a lot to do with front end as well.
Could you talk about how the three basic coding languages used in web design, so HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, how exactly the roles differ in the different projects that you've done?
Kass?
Okay, yeah. So HTML is basically just like the bones of the page, you know, just you could make a website with just HTML and it'd be just fine, but there would be absolutely zero styling. Then you have CSS, which is for me like the funnest part because it's where you get to, you know, give it life, like the colors, the branding, the animations, which also, you know, brings you to JavaScript. That's also actually really neat and the funnest part too, because you get to do different interactions with it. It brings everything, you know, to life.
Yeah, really fun analogy I heard as well is if you think of a house, like HTML would be your framework. It would be like the beams of the house, the concrete floor, the ceiling, and CSS would be the paint on the wall, the flowers that you put in, the picture frames, everything. So it makes it look really nice. And then when you add JavaScript, it would make it functional. So it would be like the light switches, the electricity.
That is so perfect.
Yeah, so that's a really nice way to think about it if like it's confusing.
Yeah, no, that's like the best I've ever heard actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that analogy is actually really, really interesting. I think it's like really helpful to understand sort of the roles of the different languages in a project. I think that's like a fantastic analogy. So moving more towards the two biggest buzzwords associated with front-end development, which is UI and UX. They've become like toolbox essentials for any front-end developer, both in web design and in product design. So firstly, what is the difference between user experience and user interface? And what is like the big hype around them? How do they help you design intuitive and interactive client products?
Mm-hmm. Well, user interface deals more with the visual things you actually see on screen. So when you think about UI, a lot of things that come into like my mind is like tools that you use to develop the actual visual interface of a website, like Photoshop, Figma, Sketch. Any of those would be used to develop it. And you're thinking about things like color, size of the fonts, the button shapes, and all these little many different elements. User experience is a bit more abstract in my understanding. It's actually a bit more research based. You're not just dealing with all the visual elements itself. You're thinking about how the user actually interacts with these experiences and the story you're taking them from when they land onto a web page. How are they navigating the site? Where are they looking? And how do you make this overall experience a more delightful or better experience for them? Like how do you entice them, for example, to sign up on a form and to buy your product? So these are all things that like UX or user experience like takes the user on a journey from when they actually go onto your web page and how they interact with all the different elements and all the pages on your site. And then UI supports that. So UX will come before UI because UX would be thinking about all the different things that you want to do and different business. It's also quite very business based as well. You're thinking about all the business needs that the website needs, and then using UI and designing that around designing the solutions to actually provide and support the experience that you want, basically.
One thing that I did notice once was I was actually in the middle of reading a book on UX UI, and I was at an airport that I'd never been to before, and it's a huge airport. I think it was like the Denver airport. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, how did I just figure out how to get from like my car all the way to this exact gate that I needed to be without having to ask somebody? And it's pretty much user experience because they have signs that are perfectly put there to make you like not frustrated and be like, oh, I have to go this way to get there. And if I want to go another way, I have to go this way. And you don't have to just like quit out of rage because you can't find it. Mm-hmm. It's all there and it's like perfectly researched for you to be able to understand exactly what the website is about, exactly where, you know, you want to drive your users and what, you know, what experience you're trying to give them.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I find that you know when something is good UX when you don't feel frustrated when you get something somewhere on a page, or even in real life, like you said, when you have an appliance and you're like, oh, I know I need to press this because there's a recess here, so you know that it's an indication you have to push down or something like that. It's when you know something is bad UX when you land on a website or a product and you're like, what do I do? I'm completely lost. I don't know what I'm doing. And do I look here? Do I look there? So it's a lot of ways. It's a lot of trial and error, but there are a lot of design patterns available with websites and just in things in general that we as humans over the years have learned how to, like, what this indicates. So, for example, one of them is like the hamburger menu. So if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's like 3 horizontal bars, usually on the top right-hand corner. And this is like mostly a universal design pattern now that we know means if I click that button on mobile, it would expand into a full menu, basically.
There's also the logo on the top left-hand side. Everyone knows that that's going to take you back home.
Yeah.
I think that was like a really great explanation of UI and UX, specifically like your example with like the airport and everything. I think it's a fantastic example to sort of illustrate how user experience is a concept beyond just like website, but just like a general concept and how it's specifically about programming. So I think that was like a really great explanation. Moving on to sort of like what so UI, UX, front end, they're all like super big hypes right now. Everyone's like, clamoring to learn the essential coding skills needed for them and get into web design. But there's also the rise of sites like Wix, which will essentially enable people with minimal programming experience to create their own websites. And recently, Twitter's been just really buzzing about OpenAI's new tool, GP3, which will sort of translate just general English into code and help you design stuff online. Of course, it's like at the opening stages, but it's got like huge potential and people are really excited about it. So what do you think the future looks like for front-end design and specifically web development?
I think the future is still really good. I actually do not have a single problem with any website like Squarespace or Wix. I actually even refer my friends over there if they need a quick like pop-up site because it's easy. They can figure it out without coding experience and it's really inexpensive for what they need. But when it comes to like, customized solutions and things that, once you go a little bit above what the very basics of a website is, then you still need a front-end developer. You still need someone to design. You still need UX and everything. So I think I'm really excited about the future that like, there's things that are going to make things easier for us that we won't have to do everything so we can focus on bigger, better things.
Mm-hmm. And I think they solve different problems as well, or they target different audiences and different needs. I guess like a good way to think about it is people can cook at home and you're able to do that, but at the same time, why are you going out and buying something from McDonald's or going like fine dining? It's like the option is there, and not everybody is going to want a custom design solution, but not everybody's going to want to eat out all the time as well. So it's good to have different options available for people who have different needs. I've worked with Wix before, and honestly, it was like the most frustrating thing for me as a developer or as a designer at the time, because I wanted to do all these different things, and the platform was not set up for me in a way that I could easily do them. It was very, very frustrating. So it's good for like Kass was saying, like if you just want a quick website, get it up, get it out there. It's really helpful for those kind of solutions. But if you wanted something more, then it is worth like going out, going fine dining, or like getting a custom solution in that way. So I think the future is good. I feel like developers and designers will always be needed, because computers and technology, we're not at the place yet where AI is so caught up where it can completely what's the word I'm looking for, where it can completely replace everything that you need to do. So there's always going to be like that human to human connection. And as those needs evolve, you will and change, like you will need people to be able to interpret that and produce like the kind of work that, or kind of, yeah, software and work that people need, basically.
I think those are extremely interesting answers and analogies. Kass, for our viewers out there who may be interested in breaking into the front end, could you talk a little bit more about your own trajectory? How did you first get introduced into this field, and what are the essential coding skills that helped you along the way?
So first introduced was actually I wanted to make a small website for a friend, and I couldn't figure it out. I really thought that like you made buttons in Photoshop. Like I had no idea how anything worked. So I just started one day, was, you know, Googled it, and I found this website called EDX, and they had a pretty, and well, everywhere online told me to start with HTML, then CSS and JavaScript. So that's what I did. And I found as many small courses as I could. And I just took all of them, you know, every day after work till from like 6 to 10 o'clock, I would just be trying to figure all of it out. I don't know. It's really fun for me to try to figure out things that I don't fully understand yet. So I remember I got like so excited when I changed the font of something, and I like yelled at my boyfriend to come look at it because I did that. But yeah, so EDX is free, and that helps me a lot with HTML, CSS. Not so much JavaScript, did not like their JavaScript course, but Udemy has some really, really, really good ones as well. That helped me so much. And with that, even just like that maybe it was like 5 months of training, and then I was able to get my first job right after that. So it's pretty quick.
Wow, that's great. Annie, you went from being a designer to a developer. What motivated this transition, and how did you leverage your prior experience to web development?
So I had a bit of a meandering journey. So I did start off as a designer. I was working as a designer, multimedia and web designer in Australia, and then in England and UK. But after that, I don't know why I did this, but probably because I love traveling, but I went to Japan and I worked as an English teacher for several years. So I was completely doing something completely different from what I studied at university. And my income completely like dropped so much, but I think I didn't really think about my future at that time. I was just interested in like, you know, seeing the world and traveling and meeting people and like seeing as much of, you know, the world as I can. So a couple of years ago, I actually moved to Toronto, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna jump back into design. And it was a big shock for me because being in Japan and teaching English for so long, the landscape had completely changed, like all the different tools and terminology and everything. And the other thing that I learned as well is that like the value of your networks and your connections. I didn't know anybody in Toronto. Like it was really, really, really hard. So for the first couple of years in Toronto, I really, really struggled. Like it was not a pretty scene. So I knew that I had to do something different. I was trying to freelance as a designer, and I did have some work, but I was also doing like hospitality stuff just to try and make ends meet. And yeah, it was just really tough. So I thought about, okay, I need to level up. What can I do? And at the time, and I didn't really want to go back to uni because it was like so much money, and like it takes so many years. And I was just like, I really didn't want to study anymore in that way. So I found out about something called a boot camp. And at the time I was thinking about, okay, do I want to go into a UX design boot camp? Because it seemed more, it seemed like a better fit for me. But then I also saw like, there was a school at the time, its name was Hacker U, but now it's known as Junior College of Technology. And I looked into them, and even though I didn't like coding at the time, I really, really liked the atmosphere and the environment of Hacker U. Like all the alumni was like, this was the best thing I've ever done. And I just really, really wanted to be a part of it. So I ended up taking a part-time course to see if I even like coding, because I did it at uni and I did it with freelancing, but I really didn't like it that much. And then somewhere along the way, because like I said, the landscape has changed so much, I started to think, okay, maybe I can do this. Like I remember troubleshooting like a button state. And like Kass was saying about the button, like at the time when I was as a web designer, I had to create the buttons and give it to the developers, and then they had to code the hover states. But now you can do the entire thing in just code. It was so much cleaner, the separation of content versus like the visual side of things was so much clearer, and everything was so much neater. So gradually I started to like it more, and I thought, okay, I can do this. Even though I hated it at first, there's something about it as I got better. Like I think about this idea that, you know, you might not be passionate about something at the beginning, but maybe if you're curious about it, I feel like as you develop skill and expertise and you get better at something, you might start to fall in love with it. And I think that was the process that happened with me. So I ended up getting accepted into the very intensive 9-week bootcamp. And I struggled, especially with JavaScript. It was so hard, and it's still really hard for me right now. But yeah, that was kind of my journey and how I ended up going from design to random English teacher and then development.
Yeah, honestly, that sounds really, really interesting. I love your sort of like diverse trajectory. It sort of shows that, like, you know, like your whole exploration aspect of your personality, and I think that's like really interesting. I also think that like both of you mentioned, like Kass, you mentioned online courses on EDX and Udemy, and you talked about boot camps. So what do you think of like weighing studying programming or CS in college or in school versus sort of self-learning it or going via online courses or boot camps? How would you weigh studying programming in formal college or school environment versus self-learning programming via online courses or boot camps?
Sorry, let me think about this one for a second. I did actually, so I went to school for architecture, and the school I went to was really design based and hands-on. So 3 years into that, I decided I hate this. I hate this so much. So I switched and started 1 year of computer science. And while the classes were good, I think I only did like 1 or 2 basic classes. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, obviously, because I didn't finish that. I stopped. And I think you can do a lot without, if you're struggling financially or if you just don't want to, and you know that you like personally have the drive and, you know, you can make yourself sit down and learn something by yourself, or in a boot camp environment like Annie, like I don't think you have to go to college. I don't think you have to get the degree, as long as you know, it's up to you if you have it in you to actually focus to get to where you want to be.
Mm-hmm. And what I hear a big difference between going to school for this or versus like doing something short like a bootcamp or self-study is that schools tend to focus, I didn't do computer science, but I know that they tend to focus a lot more on the theoretical side of things. So in my bootcamp, one of the things that was often emphasized, because we had basically, they taught us about the differences between students who had a formal degree versus like bootcamp. And one of the differences was that bootcamp students tend to have a lot more practical skills, whereas someone coming from a computer science degree, like they would know a lot more about things like O notation, like big O notation, and they'd be able to solve a lot more those theoretical kind of concepts and ideas. But when it comes to maybe building a website or something, like bootcamp students do really well because they are in a frame of mind where they're just like, I have to do this, I have to make it, and then they're able to just go for it. So both has their benefits, but I also think about like how fast technology changes. So in a university environment, even though a lot of the core concepts will always remain the same, when you're looking at technology, it changes so fast. So sometimes I feel like universities have a hard time changing their curriculums to reflect the current state of technologies. Whereas if you're self-studying or you're going through a bootcamp environment, they are in a lot better position to be able to do that. The only thing about self-study is I actually sort of struggle with self-study, which is why I went the bootcamp way. It really helped to motivate me to be in an environment where I'm surrounded by other people and I had deadlines I had to meet. You have to be very, very self-motivated to be able to do it by yourself. And that was something that I had to like kind of learn, like, which is my best way of learning. So that's why I went with a bootcamp way. But yeah, like it's really up to you. I think one of the benefits of a bootcamp is that, and obviously of university, that they have the structure already in place. When you're doing self-study, one of the things is like, oh, I'm going to do this course. Oh no, this course. And it's very easy to keep jumping and not know which one to do. Like even like now, because I'm doing self-study, I'm like, oh, I'm going to start this course. Oh, but then this one is over here. And it's like the shiny object syndrome, whereas like in a more formal environment, you don't have that. You're like, no, you have to do this. So I would say like that's kind of some of the differences. Do you have anything else to add, Kass?
I think that self-study also makes it a lot easier to jump in between, to different things because of something else shiny. I don't think that I would have learned as much and as fast without doing self-study, but I'm also a huge fan of self-study. Yeah, I did like my last year of high school as just like self-study because I just, leave me alone like for a little bit and I'll figure it out. But just like, I need to look at it by myself and I'll get it. Yeah.
Yeah, actually that reminds me of something. When I was at uni and we were doing one of our, I think it was learning like After Effects or Photoshop or something, like what I was learning at university, the course didn't really help me as much. And I remember just getting a course and doing it in my own free time after that. And I learned so much there. I think it was actually more helpful to me than what I learned at university, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally feel that.
Those are pretty incredible perspectives to have towards formal education and how your journey was in exactly the traditional route. Instead, you took something that suited you more. And I think that's a pretty bold decision to take. So bold, that reminds me of women in STEM. Now, kind of wavering the conversations towards that, as women in programming, so actively involved in the tech field, how have your experiences been like in this field? Do you think you've been treated differently than your male counterparts?
I actually do not, but mine's pretty much limited because I've only worked at 2 different companies, and the company that I'm at now, my boss is she's a woman, and she's amazing, and she's like me. She figured everything out by herself. She did self-study, and now she's like huge in the company, and she's so good at everything. So I don't think I've been limited at all in that way, but I'm pretty sure from what I've read that I may be in the minority.
Mm-hmm. I'm in my first job as a web developer, and from I haven't been treated that differently either, but I do know that from having conversations with some other male web developer friends, we were all sharing, for example, some information about our salaries and everything, and everyone had much higher salaries than I did. And I think I have read somewhere that when we look at a job description for a job, women tend to try and fill in most of the points that they need before they feel confident to accept it. And men would be like, oh, I know 2 of them. Yeah, I'm good. I'm just going to apply for it. Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, I would feel that men have a lot more confidence in applying for roles that they don't necessarily tick up all the boxes for. And I think there is definitely still a case where there is a big discrepancy between the salaries of men and women and how many women in high positions there are. And if I look at just in Twitter and on Twitter in general, most of the developers that I know are male. So I see a lot of differences. I'm trying to think if I have been treated differently. I sometimes feel that maybe because I'm a woman in tech, or maybe it's because of the design background, there is a bit less faith in our technical skills a little bit, as opposed to men. We have to kind of try to be a bit more confident in ourselves and saying yes, we know how to do it, whereas with guys or men, they don't have to do it as much. People seem to take them more at face value that yes, they can do it, whereas we have to work slightly harder. But I think with initiatives like this and everything, the landscape is slowly changing. The first female programmer is a woman, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, I did read that once. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Like, Ada Lovelace is one of our like heroes in the Girl Code. The first programmer was a woman, and it's like really amazing. And Annie, to your point about sort of like the gender discrepancies in the workplace, I think that's such a like prevalent topic even like now. I mean, it's of course improved a lot over the years, but the fact that the wage gap still exists in this day and age is frankly astounding. Um, and I think everything you said about how women need to be more confident in themselves because there are just certain assumptions that go with them just because of women. I think that's a very relatable experience to a lot of girls in programming and just generally in pretty much any workspace. I also wanted to sort of talk a little bit more about your sort of Twitter platforms or like your experience on social media platforms because you both are have fairly sizable Twitter sort of platform and influence over there. So how do you, I mean, what are your opinions on sort of the differences? Because Annie mentioned a little bit about how you see a lot of male developers on. How's your Twitter community helped you in your programming journey, or what are the differences you've seen between the female developers on social media?
For me, I was actually in a very similar place to Kass. At the very beginning, I didn't actually really use Twitter until April when I decided, okay, I'm going to do the 100 days of code and to get better at my JavaScript. And the reason I did that was because I knew that I needed some form of accountability. As I mentioned before, I personally struggle with being accountable to myself. I'm very, very good at being accountable to other people and meeting deadlines, but for myself somehow maybe I kind of struggle with that a little bit. So I tried to use Twitter in a way that would help me to keep coding. At the time though, I was working full-time and then I was coding on top of that in my free time. So after a month I burnt out. Like, it was really, really difficult. And I think this is a topic that is actually quite important to I guess like talk about. Is there's this idea that sometimes people think like you have to code all the time to be a great developer, but to be honest, there's a lot more to life than just coding. Like, I feel like you're not going to go to your grave at the end of your life and be like, yes, I coded every single day of my life, I'm a 10 times engineer or whatever it was. Like, the things that you remember are the other things in life. So after a month, I realized I wasn't able to keep up that pace because I was getting so stressed out when I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm really, really busy and I have to do this and this, but I need to do my 100 days of code. And it was just like, mentally, it was just really, really, really difficult. Like, it was a huge like mental strain for me. So I decided, okay, I need to make this journey my own and use social media or the Twitter platform in a way, and the 100 days of code journey in a way that suits me. And just to make it your own, to keep me accountable, but without all the like the mental stress and everything as well. So that's kind of how I use Twitter. And I also use it, like, I don't only share my work and use it to keep me accountable. It's been a really wonderful journey because I've connected with so many amazing developers like Kass, because we were both doing very similar things. Yeah. And there's so many really smart developers and helpful people on the platform. So that's how I try to use it, like, to connect with people, to show my work, but to also give tips and to help other developers, because I feel like on the platform that you are, like, if you imagine yourself at the middle, there'll be other developers or people who are the same level at you. So like, okay, I'm on the same journey, but then there's also people who are better than you. So you can kind of look up to them and be inspired by them. And then there's people who are below you, who are just starting, and they can look, and you can inspire them with your journey and share tips on how they can to make their path easier. So that's how I kind of see like the whole Twitter ecosystem in a way. It helps to be connected to people, to share your work, and to help others as well.
Yeah, and be inspired by looking at a bunch of different developers, what they're doing. Like, I remember I got excited looking at your first single div, Annie. Like, that was just like, I was just jaw on the floor. Like, it's so good. And yeah, and Annie was the one who actually even helped me with the whole single div thing, because I could not figure it out. And I randomly one day like asked her about it, I think, and she shared a lot of resources, and it was so helpful because one day it just clicked and that was it. then I couldn't stop.
Yeah,
Like,
she's done so many single days since then.
yeah, I couldn't stop though. Like for like 2 months, I was just like every day just coding. Finally, like Annie, I had a little bit of a burnout, kind of like, okay, I need to take a step back, calm down. It's really fun, but I have other things in my life that I would like to do. And but Twitter has helped me so much with, you know, people being so helpful, like Annie, and like, you know, being able to look up to others and see like, oh my gosh. And then it feels really, really nice to like be able to help someone and like explain to them like, you know, something they couldn't figure out in an hour that I could just explain. You know, it's really exciting to be there for somebody and to have someone be there for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you help somebody else out and you kind of teach them, it kind of reinforces your learning as well. Mm-hmm. So you're not only helping them, you're helping yourself as well in so many ways. Yeah, it's very much a win-win situation, I think.
Yeah, I'd really like to start like writing a tutorial or something on CSS art. I just need to figure out where to start because it's so massive but I'm excited. I'll do it one day.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love how you're both so sort of attuned to your Twitter community, and it's sort of like help you grow as programmers. And yeah, I know you share like a ton of really helpful resources on your Twitter page. And yes, I'm sure like everyone's really looking forward to your CSS tutorial. It's just just of your animations, everyone would like just love to see your take on your resources on how to do CSS programming. And we really love this whole community environment you've got going on Twitter, both with each other and just wider community generally. And just to that point, I think we would like to wrap up this talk with just like a final message that you would like to give to high school girls or just any woman who's sort of trying to break into this community and just starting off with her coding journey.
Kass, do you want to start?
Yeah, no, I'd say just jump into it. Try to, even if it's like an online, you know, like Twitter, try to like connect with people that are interested in the same thing that you are, because it's incredibly helpful to find like-minded people that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of. And hey, is this possible? You know, but even if you don't, that's okay too. Start on your own, do what you can, little by little, like, but just be consistent.
Yeah. And even if you don't like it at first or you hate it at first, like I did, I think it's about like finding the thing that you can love about it, I suppose, and realizing that maybe you might not like it at first, but you don't have to be passionate about it at first. If you're just curious about it and you just want to try new things and try something, you never know where that will take you. Like, don't feel like, oh, you have to do this from the very beginning, and you like just explore, just be curious and just try little things and then see where that leads. Don't put a lot of pressure on yourself to absolutely feel like, oh, this is going to be my thing for the rest of my life, because you know, so many things can change. And so just give it a go, and you never know.
Yeah, as long as you're having fun and you're not miserable, you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's like that those are like both amazing messages. You know, just get started and you know, be driven more by curiosity than by this need, sort of this like really, you know, fantasize need that you have to be really passionate about something from the get-go. I think that's like sort of like a notion people have that like you need to be like completely in love with it to do something with it, and not just like sort of satiate your curiosity. And it's a really fresh perspective on things. But yeah, I think that sort of concludes our conversation. And once again, thank you so much for being here with us. We really, really appreciate it. And we're totally in love with both of your work. And we can't wait to see what you guys do next.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. A lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
Really nice. I really enjoyed it.
We're pretty sure that our viewers as well will find this extremely inspiring as we did. So thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm just going to stop the recording right now.